Sue Turner sums up the qualities that she says make her husband a Louisiana legend.
Loyalty and honesty in business, and as far as his family is concerned, it's support and tolerance.
Bert Turner loves his family, and he loves his business. And according to the people who love him, that's really all you need to know. When Mr. and Mrs. Turner first met, she wouldn't have guessed they'd end up spending their lives together.
I don't think it was there initially, although he does have one dimple, and we danced together, and I complimented him on that dimple and told him I was going to give him a marble the next time I saw him so he could sleep on it and get a dimple in the other cheek.
After 55 years of marriage, 5 children, and a host of grandkids, Bert Turner remains devoted to home and to work.
No doubt about it. He's still in this office at 8 o'clock every morning, and he still tends to his duties, and that's watching the sheep as we work.
With 16 affiliate companies, Turner Industries is the largest industrial construction firm in Louisiana.
He took a company that had gone bankrupt, literally, and he built it from the ground floor to a company today that has 12,000 employees. We do over 800 million in volume a year, and it's a thriving, flourishing business, literally an icon in the professional industry today.
Now in his 80s, that happy baby in his mother's arms on the front porch of the family home is proud to have a family of his own at home and another at work. Quite a payoff for a lifetime of work for this Louisiana legend.
So Bert, I want you to know that our congratulations go with everyone else's, and it's wonderful that you can be considered a legend by others, but the most important thing is what you have been to us and the children and the grandchildren and our whole family. And we love you and couldn't ask for a more wonderful life than that one you've given us. Thank you.
I'm with a gentleman whom F. Scott Fitzgerald would have called the last tycoon. I'm with Bert Turner in his gorgeous building in Baton Rouge. And if there is such a thing as a tycoon, although he wouldn't want to be called that, it is Bert Turner. He is chairman of the board of about 15 or 16 companies. Bert, how many employees do you have?
Somewhere between 12 and 13,000.
That's
all over USA and then a few foreign spots.
I told Bert that the only bad thing about being on this program is that your creditors can find you. And he said they already have, and don't worry about it. Now you, for this incredible empire which you built, you started in a place that, so help me, I had never heard of. Elizabeth, Louisiana. Where is that?
That's about 12, 15 miles west of Oakdale.
Yes, sir.
If anybody knows where Oakdale is.
Oh, yes. Oh, that's a city, of course.
Well, it's about halfway between Ellick and Lake Charles.
Now, Bert, you didn't start out exactly as a tycoon, did you?
No, not quite.
Your mother, you said, was a school teacher.
She was a school teacher, right.
And your dad worked at the?
He worked at for a lumber company.
Which was?
In the South, mostly in the Louisiana area or over there around Oakdale where they had the mill when I was born.
Yes, sir. And how did y'all finally leave Elizabeth?
Well, we...
I think your dad passed away, didn't he?
Well, yeah, but that was a real reason. We were on a vacation and not too much of one in visiting an aunt and uncle in Missouri, where Mother originally came from, and so he was fishing and slipped, fell, and was drowned.
My God.
And I was about, that was in about 1929, I think. So I was about 8, there about time.
So y'all were on your own.
Time flies.
Yeah.
So then we moved back, we moved to Missouri, mother's home territory.
Would you say that your mother was the dominant influence in your life?
Well, she was, for many, many years, I'd have to say yes. She worked hard, and she did everything she could to see that I moved along and got a good education and got pretty good background.
And you went to LSU. Now, how did you go to LSU? How'd you get the money? Did you work or scholarship or what?
Well, LSU, it was just work. But see, LSU, I worked, studied hard, and
In engineering?
And I worked all the way through there, and I took engineering. Yeah,
you have one of the most interesting backgrounds, even at LSU. You told me that you tried to be in the band, but you weren't good enough on the trombone. So guess what Bert Turner ends up, who can't play the trombone in the band? He ends up the colonel of the cadet corps. That is unheard of.
Just the corps, just the engineering
corps, but you were colonel.
Yeah.
Sir, you graduated from LSU.
Right.
And then what did you do?
Well, I went immediately into service.
Yes, sir.
After graduating from LSU.
And you were in the Pacific.
Yeah, I stayed in the States for a while, but then I was all together in the service about 3.5 years, but of that I spent 26 months overseas.
Looking back, was that a valuable experience?
Oh, I'd say yes, it was.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Had to be. In fact, all the way along the line, I don't know that I can look at all the things I've done, and they were all valuable and helpful in giving you background and exposure to
You learned along the way.
You're learning, yeah.
And then your education wasn't quite through. You got out of the service and went to work, like so many thousands of Baton Rouge people. You went to work at Exxon, didn't you?
Right, yes.
And how long did you work there?
Well, I worked there about a year and a half or so, 2 years I think altogether, and got a scholarship to go to school. I had a choice of, I believe it was Cornell, Harvard Business School, and I've forgotten the other one, another major university.
Yes, sir.
And I opted to go to Harvard Business School.
Well, you got an MBA.
Got an MBA.
You know, most people, and you're very well known all over the state, and many states, most people don't know that you have that MBA from Harvard.
Well, I don't know that they need to.
Now, Bert, what kind of experience was that, Harvard University?
That was probably the best 2 years in the educational field that I ever spent. The faculty was excellent, and in those days I used the case method, which I think was a good way to for us at that stage. Most of us in my classes were back from the service.
Yes, sir.
And had service time, and some industry, some none.
Had Louisiana, LSU, do you feel you had been well prepared to attend Harvard? Because, let's face it, that's the top of the rung, you know. Did you feel you were ready for Harvard University when you went?
Well, yes, I've had self-confidence, and I was had some questions, but after a while I felt comfortable there. And all in all, did quite well. I graduated with distinction finally.
Which is really something. Bert, so you get out of Harvard, you have your MBA, and what do you do then?
I came back to Exxon.
Yes, sir. And you had an interesting career at Exxon, you told me.
Yeah.
Many things you did there, didn't you?
Yeah.
And then one day, you told me, you got a visit from a man named Nichols,
Right.
who owned a small construction company.
Well, I had been in my last assignment with Exxon. I was a senior buyer in purchasing, and one thing I handled was construction. And so Bob Nichols was Nichols Construction was calling on us to sell his services, and I got to know Bob, and we struck up a good relationship, and so he made me an offer, and after a little while I accepted.
You went to work for him?
Yeah.
When did you meet Miss Sue? I must tell our audience that Bert Turner's wife may be the loveliest lady I've ever met, and everybody thinks so, not just Gus Weill. Where'd you meet Miss Sue, who was from Plaquemine?
Well, she's from Plaquemine, and I met her. That was back after the war, and I was working at Exxon, and it was in 1947, and we. I was a deke at LSU, and I went out there after the war. A lot of my buddies that hadn't graduated. I graduated before I left to go into service.
Yes, sir.
A lot of my classmates and others didn't. So they were back out there at school, and it was just a natural thing to do to go out and spend some time with them on nights and weekends. And Sue was dating one of the deeks in those days, and I met her, and
you took her.
And
you took her from that deke.
Yeah.
He turned his head for a second, and she was gone.
Well,
y'all have 5 kids, 3 sons, 2 daughters.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Bert, okay, so you're with Nichols Construction Company, a relatively small outfit. I think you said they had 2 estimators.
No, 2 or 3.
2 or 3. When did you...
And, you know, it's a reasonable number of superintendents.
It's a little bigger now.
And had some equipment and an equipment operation. It was small, but it wasn't
not that small.
Wasn't that small, yeah.
Bert, when did you decide something that's a terrible decision for a person to make? I know I made it, and sometimes I look back and wonder if it was the right decision. When did you decide to go into business for yourself, for Bert Turner?
Well, I don't know. You know, I had been in the, while I was working at Exxon, along the way I'd had an interest through Sue's uncle, Bussy Pope. I had gotten to know about the wholesale automotive parts business, and so I had a little operation in southwest Louisiana, kind of as parallel and minority compared to my main job. So we got to the point where after Bob's death, then I had worked for Yuba Consolidated Industries, which was another interesting experience for about a year and a half. After his death, his brother Lewis, who was the number 3 man in the FBI at that time.
Wow.
And his wife Ruth Nichols, who's still here in Baton Rouge, and a lovely little lady. Anyhow, for her needs and purposes, they sold the company to Yuba Consolidated Industries, YUBA. They were out of California. And they were one of the early conglomerates before anybody knew what conglomerate meant.
Yes, sir.
And they had some problems, not with us necessarily, but with some of the leadership they had at that time, and they didn't do too well. So as that happened, that's when I got around to making the decision that I either was going to have to go full-time out on my own, or and whether it's in the construction maintenance business or whether it was in the auto parts. And I opted to go with Bob Nichols and then to go on pursue that on a full-time basis.
So you had some breaks along the way, Mr. Nichols recognizing your talent and so on, but you attribute your success to real hard work.
Well, I think there are some exceptions that, just they have the natural knack and maybe they don't have to work too hard to have a high level of success. But in my case, I learned my lesson at Exxon. I thought I was pretty sharp when I went to work out there, but I found myself surrounded with people from top engineering schools all over the country, and I had reconciled myself by saying, well, I'm going to work longer and harder than they did.
Wow.
But because I figured that, but I didn't, because basically they were sharper than I was and smarter, and they worked just as hard as I did, and some of them maybe even a little more. So, and some of them, for example, one boss I had, he wound up being my boss for 2 years, was Cliff Garvin, who was ultimately chairman of the board of Exxon.
Wow.
So
there was some pretty good talent
I had
there.
pretty good, and Exxon's always had high quality people.
Bert, if a young man or woman came to you today for counsel, for advice, you've had a long, distinguished career, would you tell them that there's opportunity in Louisiana? I'm curious. Would you tell them to stay here?
Oh, sure. We've got worlds of opportunity around here. It's just a matter of deciding. I think the first thing they need to decide is what they think they really want to do. Now, maybe they don't know that at the time when you come right out of school, and that's one thing that sometimes worries me about education, specializing in one field, because in my case, I didn't use engineering per se. I did a little at Exxon, but mostly I used the business side. But they need to decide what they're going to do, what they want to do, and then as they progress, they got to be sure they like it and they enjoy it, and they got to recognize that if they're not the best talent upstairs or otherwise, then it's going to take a lot of hard work.
Let me ask you, what fields might you counsel young people today, just out of college, got the degree? What fields would you counsel people to go into? I'm curious.
Well, I think certainly that's a changing world. I'm not so sure that I'm smart enough to really know in some of these newer fields how fast they're moving, which one is moving faster. But you got, when you say technology, you got all sorts of things in that broad spectrum that is still there. And then in communications, the computers, the applications, that has got to be, it's going to be even more so in running businesses, controls, or education, everywhere. That's got to be a major field.
My gosh, if anyone had told you or me about these things called computers, can you imagine? We'd have had no concept of what they were talking about.
Well, not the way it is now. Last when I really getting automated was when I had a slide rule when I was in college of engineering.
That was automation. Bert, what do you do for relaxation? I mean, you don't have to work. What do you do to relax?
Right now, I'm working about as hard as ever, but mostly working trying to get things shaped up where I can relax 100% of the time.
You still come to work, you told me.
Yeah, most every day, and but Sue and I got plans, and we're going to do some more looking at places we haven't been. Fortunately, in connection with business and otherwise, we've done and me and the Army have done a fair amount of travel, but not as much as we'd like. So that's going to be our major. That, and she's very much involved in.
Sue, yes.
Sue is involved in a lot of activities here, and some of them I kind of go along on the fringes.
Yes, sir.
And have been involved in some of them myself. So, you know, like preservation and...
Oh, you're the list of charitable activities that you've done and been recognized for. It would take 5 television programs to name them. You've been very active in causes, good causes.
Well, but I'm trying still to help out at LSU, and I'm still on a couple of boards out there, and I want to continue to be concerned about education in our state, and I think that's another thing that we've gotten. It's improving, I think, rapidly in certain facets, anyhow, so that I'm going to be interested in that. I've had a little leg problem, but if I get that solved in the near future, I hope to go back playing golf. And then the rest of the time, I think soon I'm going to travel, read, and just to pleasure ourselves.
When you, in the past, hired these people who've stayed with you and have become your chief executives of these many businesses that over which you're chairman of the board, what qualities did you look for? I'm just in people you hired.
Well, the same qualities that people need to look at these days, I think. It really is. You have to be convinced that they're reasonably sharp, smart. After you've got to know them a little better, you got to be convinced they're honest, straightforward.
Were you an easy man or a hard man to work for?
Well, ask some of them, they'd probably say I was hard. But I tried not to be. I think you got to be fair is one of the main things, and your word should be your bond. If you tell them something, that you shouldn't tell them until you know what you're doing, and then when you do, you should do it.
Bert,
to the best of your ability.
I really wish I could share with LPB's viewers the companies that you really there. To a great extent, your companies, I mean, they number 15 or 16, one of which, of course, is Turner Industries, in this gorgeous building that you occupy in Baton Rouge, right off of Exxon Lane. And you've had just a heck of a career. And on behalf of the many people whose lives you've influenced for the good, and particularly on behalf of your fellow citizens, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you and to be on this program.
Thank you, Bert.
For a copy of this program, call 1-800-973-7246 or send $19.95 to Louisiana Legends, care of LPB, 7733 Perkins Road, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 70810. Please allow 4 to 6 weeks for delivery.